Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and these are my top 5 favourite types of horror in fiction. So welcome back to the channel, if that is the case. We are right at the end of May. In fact, as this video goes out, it will be the final day of May. And of course, May has been Horror Mayhem, and I've been reading lots of short works of horror. And I thought, in honour of Horror Mayhem, I would have a little chat today about some of my favourite types of horror. In fiction, that is. Don't watch a lot of horror movies. And when I do, I often watch very different stuff to the sort of stuff that I read. The sort of stuff that I read I would scare the pants off me in visual format. so I have quite different tastes. So yes, it's going to be stuff in horror fiction today. So I have my top 5 favourite types, subgenres, elements, if you like, in horror. I've also got, as a bonus for you, 5 types that I kind of need to read more of, that I've only read a tiny bit of, and I've liked what I've read, but I definitely need to expand my knowledge of those subgenres. So then into the main event, my top 5 favourite types, subgenres, elements, etc. in horror. These are not ranked. I couldn't come up with a ranking for them. It depends very much on what I'm in the mood for. I kind of love them all equally, if you like. So this is just in no particular order, my top 5. So first of all then, we've got apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic. I love this. In fact, some of my favourite books are in this genre. And I like this because it is very much like, the whole world is the threat. It's a world that is completely changed from what we know. And so you've got, kind of the environment, the landscape might be a threat. If there's been a nuclear annihilation, then you're going to have, kind of irradiated areas, things like that. You've got often the threat of other people, other survivors, who may not have, the same kind of, the same intentions, say, as your protagonist, your good guys, if you like. And then you've probably got some sort of monsters as well, some sort of other threats, otherworldly threats, whether that's, monsters or aliens or supernatural stuff, whatever it might be. So the whole world feels very, very threatening, and often quite dark. My favourite book of all time, The Passage, is a post-apocalyptic sort of vampire novel. Vampire isn't the word that's used, but it's vampiric. It's a virus thing. It's a virus vampires post-apocalyptic tale, epic tale. And yeah, I love that. That's got all of the elements that I adore about it. You've got a group of survivors on a quest, to find the thing, the MacGuffin, essentially, that will help to save / improve the world, get rid of like the major threat that's stopping the world from getting better, whatever it may be. And yeah, you've got this quest that takes you all over the place. You get to see some really great world building in it, things like that. And in that, you've also got like the before the apocalypse, the actual apocalypse, and then you've got post-apocalypse, when you go 100 years into the future after the event, after the apocalyptic event. So yeah, that's one reason why that book is my favourite. I think that's it's such a great setting. The Stand, of course, by Mr. Stephen King, another great virus outbreak apocalypse novel. Again, another one where you've got bands of survivors on a quest, all having to come together to try and build a new and better society, or at least make the decision between what kind of society they might want to build, and the fight against the opposing forces. I'm just in the middle of a swan song at the moment for my quarterly chunk for Q2. Another one where you've got, you know, kind of it's survival. It's a world that was our world but no longer is. A great one, a short one, is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Helen Ellison. Really short story, but really effective, set in a world where AI, essentially, that we built as humans, has taken over and is using a small band of survivors that it keeps alive for its own entertainment. It tortures them for its own entertainment. That one is quite a dark little story. So anything world ending, things like that in horror is bound to pique my interest. Okay, next up we've got cursed or possessed objects. I have read mostly short stories for this, not a huge amount of actual full-length novels on this. Because I think they work really well as short stories when it's a possessed object or a cursed object. My favourite is M.R. James. I think he is the master of like that antiquarian horror. Things like the Mezzo-Tint, which is one of my favourite short stories ever. That's fantastic. You know, this cursed, haunted picture, and it's very creepy. And I think the reason I like it is because it's you know, it is taking often small things, you know, like even like an old coin or a jewelry box or something like that, or a piece of jewelry, or a picture, you know, like with the Mezzo-Tint, things that generally are inanimate, a doll, a puppet, things like that as well, things that are generally inanimate objects. And giving them a power that they shouldn't have. And certainly when it's a sinister power. These things that are generally just, you know, they sit around doing nothing in your house or in a museum or wherever, that should be no threat at all, but then they become quite a threat when they are in your possession. Yeah, I just really like that. You can play with that, I think, really well. Anything, essentially, could become a threat. Even the most, you know, innocuous of objects. But yeah, M.R. James does it particularly well. I have read some more kind of contemporary authors doing sort of similar stuff, but a lot of it has been quite obviously influenced by M.R. James and the like, things like that. So yeah, cursed, possessed objects. I'm writing some of my own stuff on that as well. That's inspired, that sort of stuff has inspired me to write short stories on things like that. Okay, next up then, this isn't a subgenre so much as kind of an element, and this one is extreme environments, and I'm talking extreme environments on Earth, so not space, things like that. That's a separate thing. For me, but I'm talking like high altitude, so like high altitude mountains, Everest, things like that, deep ocean, Arctic and Antarctic, underground cave systems, etc., that kind of thing. So extreme environments that we have, as the human race, have explored somewhat, but are still very they're still very much threatening and difficult to survive in, difficult to exist in as humans. Yeah, anything like that will immediately go on my wish list. Again, it goes back to the same thing as with the apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic. The environment itself is a threat. And no matter what the kind of supernatural, paranormal, whatever it is, you know, kind of threat that might be in a particular book, on top of that extreme environment, whether it's a, you know, creature feature with something like, you know, deep ocean and sharks, or it's, you know, kind of the Yeti in the mountains, things like that, or something supernatural in the Arctic. It's the environment adds so much, often claustrophobia and suspense to it, I mean, I've been lucky that most of the books that I've read with this element to it have really made use of those environments well, and the description from the authors has been fantastic, and it really puts you in that environment and adds that sense of claustrophobia. Some examples, one that I read recently, or a couple that I've read recently, From Below by Darcy Coates. That's essentially kind of a haunting of a ship, essentially, a sunken ship, which a camera crew go down to film in the deep ocean. And so you've got the haunting element of it, you've got the kind of the haunting possession, whatever you want to call it, in that. But what makes it really tense is the claustrophobia of the dive, and the threats that come with just undertaking an activity like that. You know, the time limitations, the need to maintain your oxygen supply, the things that could go wrong, the things you're constantly aware of, and there's no quick exit of somewhere like that, because you know you've got to ascend back up to the surface in a slow way, so you don't end up with the bends. You know, there's a lot in there just within that environment that makes it a very threatening place, let alone, you know, ghosties and horrible things like that. Same with The Terror by Dan Simmons. You know, there's a supernatural element to that, but what I really loved about that was the threat of the Arctic environment, the crews of the Terror and the Erebus, and being stuck there and running out of resources, and you know, the way that psychologically affects the crews, psychologically and physically affects the crews. Again, a certain claustrophobia, even though it's like such a massive open space. The way that the environment moves and changes in the Arctic with the ice flows and things like that, the confusing nature of it. All these things kind of really help to increase that level of tension and unease, that kind of unnerving feeling when you're reading it. Far more so, I think, personally, than the supernatural element. So yeah, extreme environments, absolutely, you know, anything like that, anything set in one of those environments, no matter what the extra kind of horror element to it is, I will give a go to. Okay, next up then, something completely different, body horror. This is the one out of all of my favourites that I would say is the one that really does actually scare me. The rest of them, they're exciting. They're exciting. They can be a bit creepy. They can kind of get the you know, the pulse going, etc. They can be a bit unnerving to read. But this is the one that I find the most difficult to read. Body horror. It's the one that often grosses me out the most. And just gives me a bit of a, yeah, I don't know how to put it really. It disturbs me. I think it disturbs me the most. But I love it. When it's done well, it can be so effective. And I think for me, it's quite easy to sort of realise why I love body horror. You know, as a trans person, you know, kind of living in a body which is feels alien to you. You know, that there's a horror to that in real life. You know, before I transitioned, so I think, you know, it taps into that for me, in a very different, you know, in an extreme way, and with a supernatural element to it often, or some sort of strange element to it. But I think it's, you know, it's a popular one anyway, because I think it's a universal thing to kind of, you know, need your body to feel like yours, like you have autonomy over it, and when you don't, it's scary. And by ramping that fear, you know, that scare up with these, you know, kind of horror elements in fiction, it can really help. It can be quite cathartic, actually, I think, reading body horror, even though, as I say, it creeps me the hell out. I've read quite a lot of body horror. I've probably read, out of all of my horror reading, I think probably most, like, it's probably the most read subgenre for me. Um, so some that I particularly like of varying degrees of body horror. Thinner by Stephen King, writing as Richard Bachman. I really liked that. It was quite a sort of a slow-paced one, and it wasn't uber gory or anything like that. In fact, the psychology of it, of what's happening to this main character as he's, you know, cursed and he keeps losing weight no matter how much he eats, and he's getting thinner and thinner and thinner. It's the psychological elements that come in with that that really worked for me with that one. I really liked that one. Our Wives Under the Sea, not again, not pulse-pounding terror or anything like that, just extremely unnerving, and also includes some deep water stuff as well. So bonus. But yeah, again, you know, a bodily change, an uncontrollable bodily change, and also it's about, you know, kind of the response from the person who is changing. It's about the response of her partner, her wife. So it's seen from someone else's perspective, which I found really interesting. Clive Barker, I think, does body horror particularly well. You know, I've read quite a few short stories by Barker, and Hellbound Heart, and I think he does it particularly well. And then Eric LaRocca's Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. That's another one that really unnerved me with the elements of body horror in that. And that is one of my favourite sort of subgenres of body horror, and that's parasites. I don't know why I'm drawn to stuff about parasites, like worms and stuff. Because they gross me out big time. I think it's that invasion of your body, something that is using you to live and destroying you at the same time. But yeah, the parasitic stuff. I'm like, it is like, I want to read it, but I don't want to read it. It's it's one of those. So yeah, anything that's parasite based, I will give a go to. The Troop, I really enjoyed The Troop. That was gross, and that had, you know, plenty of other horror elements in terms of survival, things like that as well. Worm by Simon Ian Childer, a good old school horror paperback that I read for Garb August. That was great as well. So yeah, parasites. If anybody knows any particularly great parasite horror books, let me know. So then the final one of my top 5 then, and I think if I had to pick one which is my favourite, I think this is probably it, and that is the creature feature or animal attack horror. I particularly like insects, as mentioned, worms, whether they're parasitic or not. But yeah, insects, stinging things, biting things, scuttling things, and deep sea stuff. I love my shark animal attack books, whether that's, you know, Jaws or The Meg, things like that, you know, real or, you know, imagined, or, you know, kind of big old water dwelling dinosaur type things. Yeah, anything like that. And it could be, you know, a mutated creature, a real creature, a possessed creature, no matter what it is, and anything animal attack. I've only just got into that really in the last couple of years. I never really read anything, and certainly the shark stuff, I hadn't read anything, because I'm terrified of sharks in visual form. There's no way I'd watch The Meg or Jaws or anything like that. Jaws was what started off that fear, that phobia. But in book form, I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I'll read anything like that. Short stories, long, whatever. So yeah, creature features, I've got a ton of stuff waiting to be read on that, but I keep just working my way through. It's such a great fun one. I think that's why I like it so much. I always find them like really, really good fun. They're often a bit over the top, I think, the ones that I tend to go for. And you know, they're not scary. they're exciting. I think they're exciting and they're fun. And that's why I like them. They're kind of the antithesis to body horror in that respect. Body horror is for when I really want something dark and scary. Creature feature animal attack is when I want something super fun. So there we go. Those are my top 5 types of horror fiction. So the bonus things then, things that I still need to read some more of, that I've only read bits and pieces of, but I've liked so far. First up is folklore and myth, that kind of thing. It often has a rural setting, and I think that's why I like what I've read of it. And you know, it's kind of quite strange as well. It's quite weird, a lot of it, whether that's cryptid stuff or whether that's kind of, you know, much more like classical mythology, or, as I say, kind of folklore from, you know, like historic folklore, traditional folklore, say in Britain, for instance, Celtic folklore, stuff like that. I've read only really a couple of novels which use folklore, and a graphic novel, and I've read quite a few short stories that use folklore and myth, but I feel like it's one that I really do need to like expand my reading on, because it does influence what I have read, has influenced what I write as well. So I do need to kind of get back into that and you know, kind of read more of that. Another one which I've read very little of is cosmic horror. So Lovecraft, I've only read a couple of Lovecraft stories before, and I do want to kind of branch out and try and find some cosmic horror, like contemporary cosmic horror, that I can get into. Lovecraft, in terms of writing style, I'm not a huge fan of what I've read, but I like the sort of, you know, monsters, the kind of world building, if you like, the mythology, the mythos, and so I want to try and find maybe some authors that can do, you know, that are influenced by that, but have got their own twist on it, and it's a bit more of contemporary writing style. Another one is haunted buildings. So haunted houses, obviously, but haunted anything really, buildings wise. I've only just really kind of started reading a couple of haunted house stories, and I've really enjoyed them generally. Apart from the Grady Hendrix How to Sell a Haunted House, which I didn't like. Some other stuff that I've read on the haunted house side of things, I've really enjoyed. There was a short Gemma and Moore book, I'm trying to think what it's called, 6 Rooms, that was very good fun, kind of a haunted house type thing. That was an old haunted house with a tour, you know, open to the public, and a tour went round it, and, you know, lots of weird things happened. That was good, and a few independent short things I've read that are kind of haunted house type things that have been very interesting. So I want to read some more of that. I am going to read some Shirley Jackson later in the year, The Haunting of Hill House, and I recently, for Horror MAYhem, in fact, read The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, and again, that's a great one for like a haunted house story. So yeah, haunted houses, haunted buildings generally. I want more of that, please. And next up is werewolves. I've read a couple of short stories, werewolf short stories, in the past, and I've only ever read one werewolf novel, and that is The Forsaken Boy by BookTube's very own Mr. Troy Tradup, which I really enjoyed, really enjoyed. And after that, I put a load of werewolf novels kind of, you know, on my wish list, with Troy's help, who knows his way around the werewolf novels of the world, and I've still got to get to them. So I do need to like make some time and like actually, you know, purposefully go and say, right, I'm gonna do that now. But yeah, I really like the werewolf stuff. I think it's that change again, that kind of uncontrollable change, and kind of that exploration of kind of rage, that kind of explosive, uncontrollable rage that comes through. So yeah, definitely need to explore that more. And And then finally, I've got space or alien horror, which I think I'll probably get into more as I kind of go through more science fiction reading. I kind of steered clear of it for a bit because I didn't think I liked science fiction and space stuff. But then I've read a couple of the alien kind of novelizations and tie-ins, both in text form and graphic novel form, comic book form. And a couple of other kind of science fiction pieces that kind of dip into the horror elements. There's a Walking to Aldebaran by Alien Tchaikovsky, which certainly has some horror elements to it. But yeah, I now I'm getting into science fiction. I do feel like I want to kind of branch out a bit and certainly look at more horror crossover with the science fiction, especially space, set in space. I really like Night Flyers, for instance, by George R.R. Martin. And that's definitely got some horror elements to it. So yeah, I definitely need to like explore that more. So that's enough rambling from me today, I think, folks. Thank you very much for watching, as always. Do drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do let me know what your favourite subgenres of horror are, what you like, what you don't like, what you need to read more of. And if you've got any recommendations, particularly for the stuff that I want to read more of, so that's folklore, myth, cosmic horror, haunted houses, buildings, etc., werewolves and space / alien horror. Any good recommendations on those, do let me know in the comments. That would be very much appreciated. I will be back on Sunday with a little update on my Read What You Own challenge and how that's going. Yes, a little confession to make. So I do hope you'll tune in and join me for that then. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.